currently heading the energy unit at STPI, and I'll be moderating the session and the roundtable today. So let me very briefly set the agenda. So again, a basic goal for today is to kind of discuss the country platforms, both in terms of the global learnings and lessons we have based on our experiences, and then specifically looking into them for the case of Pakistan. So as for this very basic, I think some of the participants among us does understand what platforms are, how they're the country-led programs that bring these various stakeholders, including the government, the international financing institutions, the development partners, and very importantly, the private sector to create these investments to tackle the climate change. So we'll be going to a lot of these discussions as we move along with the program. And as for the agenda, after the opening remarks from Dr. Khalid Waleed, we'll be going into the keynote address on Pakistan's climate prosperity plan from Hamza, and then a scene-setting presentation from SDPI's end, after which we'll be going into the roundtable discussion. We firstly will look from the international experts, including Ms. Sobia, Elvin, Dr. Crispian, and the colleagues on the Elvin on the international perspective, and then coming down to Pakistan's case, where we have Mustafa, Suhail Malik Saab as well, and then towards the final recommendations, we'll all be giving us suggestions as well. And for Farhan will also be taking you both in the first and the third rounds as well. Before going into the technical discussion, let me set some of the housekeeping rules. The session is being conducted online, but at the same time, the session is being recorded, and we're also going live on multiple social media platforms, including LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. The video would also be available online. Feel free to share it within your networks. And for the online speakers, I'll request them to turn on their cameras, especially when they're speaking. And if your network allows to do so. If you face any network challenges, feel free to close it as well. And we do have a lot of opportunities and we do really want the general participants to put their questions. You can paste them in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll pick it right from there as well. Or if you want to speak, you can also click on the raise hand tab as well. I think as we go along, I'll be introducing each of the speaker separately as well, but just to kind of let the things making things go. Let me invite Dr. Khalid Waleed. Dr. Khalid is currently working as a research fellow at Sustainable Development Policy Institute for official opening remarks. So yes, Dr. Khalid, with this, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ubaid. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Well, it is very timely, very insightful that we are discussing this for Pakistan, particularly in a context that the grant-based climate finance model, it is gradually eroding, rapidly eroding, I would say, particularly after USA's withdrawal from Paris Agreement and other sort of things. We all know that the traditional model of climate finance that is anchored in grants and concessional flows is eroding. Developing countries like Pakistan, where once the large-scale grant-based support was promised, Pakistan was looking for it to cope with climate change. Yet the political economy of climate finance has shifted. We need to look for the alternatives. We need to look for more integrated sort of solutions where we integrate financial planning, development priorities into one single equation. Just to give you some context of Pakistan, Pakistan right now is under two IMF programs. First is Extended Fund Facility Program, which is focused on macroeconomic stability of Pakistan. But the second one is very interesting. That is the Climate Change Program, Resilience and Sustainability Facility, which sort of works around on what is the institutional governance of climate change. Would be and what would be the macro critical aspects of climate change. So there is that as well. This is where the role of integrated planning comes in. I always say that Pakistan's problem is not only economy problem, not only Pakistan's energy sector is in turmoil, or not only Pakistan is facing climate vulnerabilities, but these are interlinked challenges. I often call it as economy, energy, and environment, the 3E crisis of Pakistan, which demands not just the grant-based climate financing, but an integrated planning solution That should include market-based climate finance mechanism, particularly carbon markets under Article 6, green bond markets, sustainability-linked instruments, blended finance structures, and the catalytic role of philanthropic networks as well, and the private sector. So we need to bring public sector players, the philanthropic networks, plus the private sector on one board with a comprehensive integrated planning that can be called as a country platform. So against this backdrop, the idea of country platform has emerged as a practical and institutional solution. A country platform is not, I would say, not another donor conference that we are used to, or any pledging session. It should be government-led, uh, a standing mechanism, a kind of permanently on deal table with rules, with mechanisms, with plan that convenes different ministries, integrate them, development partners, and private financiers around a single national transition plan. The aim is simple yet transformative to ensure that the priorities, policies, pipelines, and money move in lockstep rather than in silos. This is very important, particularly for the case of Pakistan. If you see different ministries, different stakeholders, they often work in silos. We need to integrate their efforts, and then maybe the development priorities of development partners, private sectors, I think that need to be brought into one equation. This idea first uh, elevated by the G20. We often see it in the form of just energy transition partnerships, but now it has taken another shape, which is, I would say, more complete. What makes a platform a true platform? I have 3 to 4 things, important pillars of a true platform. First and foremost is it should have a national ownership with a single strategy. It must be anchored either in NDCs, long-term strategies, or sectoral transition roadmaps, so that we have a single strategy for that can link economic priorities, environmental priorities, and what are different transition pathways. And second, it should have a formal governance, uh, particularly a political government, particularly from a standpoint of Pakistan. It should have political national ownership, but the governance structure should be apolitical, a cabinet level steering committee supported by technical working groups. That should be the backbone of this planning. Third is policy pipeline linkages, reform milestones, tariff adjustments, regulatory reforms, MRV systems, investment plannings, sectoral pathways that must be directly tied to the investable project pipeline, a transparent project data dashboard, something like that. The ministry has created in Pakistan, that is climate finance dashboard. That is very important in that regard. Fourth one is the structure that could bind different blended finance mechanisms. The platform must rearrange the financial stack, public and IFI concessional capital guarantees, and private sector commitments before negotiations, not after. This has happened in Pakistan and in developing countries. Like we do not prepare ourselves, particularly in terms of planning, in terms of devising a whole integrated planning, particularly from a standpoint, what are different investable projects. For example, in the case of South Africa, their JETP funding around 8.6 was committed. $8.6 billion was committed, but the South Africa only managed to utilize the 10% of it. What was the reason? Because the most of it was loan-based financing, and they hadn't planned it in a way that was linked with the country's priorities, development priorities. So now the JETP, of course, the USA's withdrawal, it has taken a backseat, but still we need to plan it in a way that we have investable projects that, and we know that what we are going to do with this money and what would be the visible, implementable transition pathways for a country. And lastly, very important pillar, accountability and transparency. A result-based framework with public disclosure ensure that no partner can free ride. That is very important. And then if you go into different uh, why these these platforms matter in these times, particularly beyond the donor conferences or nice workshops. uh, they compress transaction cost, particularly by creating one forum where policy reforms, concessionality, guarantees, and private sector negotiation converge, reducing years of bilateral back and forth. So this is one utility of platforms, that it brings all the stakeholders together, and we should strive for bringing all the stakeholders together in one country platform that will help Pakistan, particularly where the planning happens in the silos. Second is the sequence of reforms with finance. That is very important, that you cannot have a successful country platform without the finance ministry on the board, without the financial institution on board. So disbursements are tied to a regulatory or policy moves, reducing the policy risk premium that otherwise inflates the cost of capital. So again, bringing all the stakeholders together, particularly the financial stakeholders, it will reduce the cost. Uh, Again, these platforms, particularly for developing countries, because the transition costs are huge, they enable scale by giving donors and private financiers the confidence to commit capital against a transparent, nationally endorsed pipeline. For Pakistan, this matters profoundly. Our power sector suffers from high capacity payments and stranded costs. Our fiscal deficit leaves little room for both subsidies, and our citizens may face mounting costs from climate disasters. So we need to have a well-designed country platform with implementable plan, where we not only focus on bringing uh, climate finance, the grant-based climate finance, but also what the role of rationalized role of private sector, so that we sort of have an integrated plan. There are some principles that should govern Pakistan's platform. I mean, these are my broad stroke of thinking. First, there should be a mandate, particularly in terms of just like the South Africa's JETP, it was stationed, the secretariat was stationed at the presidential palace. Maybe in Pakistan, a cabinet decision appointing a lead ministry and authorizing a secretariat, and then a plan of pipeline, and then maybe what would be the workable term sheets that could be followed, and then finance stack, pre-agreed concessional tranches, guarantees, private commitments, MRV and disclosure, and then lastly, a social contract, particularly embedding just transition principle and inclusion, ensuring communities and workers benefit rather than bear the brunt of transition. That is very important. If you are not bringing uh, in this model, the public-private model of country platform, you're not bringing the communities, the third P people. I'm sure Sobia is going to talk about these P's as well. I don't think so these would work. What are different common pitfalls or disadvantages? Our platform is not a new fund. We should have a consensus on this. Simply rebranding donor meetings will achieve nothing. No policy spine, no private money. Without reforms on tariffs, permitting and grid integration, even guarantees cannot compensate. So we need to make it in a broader context. And finally, there is a role of philanthropy networks as well. Philanthropy is not a substitute for public or private capital, but it is catalytic, particularly in terms of de-risking and other sort of uh, investment attracting tools. In Pakistan's case, philanthropic actors can play finance, the soft side of transactions, skills development, social protection for affected communities that they are doing, and gender inclusion areas often neglected in market-driven frameworks. They can also support piloting new models, absorbing early risk that later enable scaling through private and IFI capital. Dear experts, if Pakistan is to navigate the era of eroding grants and expanding markets, the country platform is not optional, I would say. The planning done in silos historically that we have done, that should not be the course of future planning. we need to opt for integrated planning solution, whole of a society, whole of a sector sort of approach. It should be, the country platform should be used as a vehicle that can convert ambition into action, uncertainty into investment, and fragmentation into coherence. This is where I stop, and I look forward to the expert discussion, how Pakistan can develop its country platform, how Pakistan can plan in an integrated way, and how we can have one policy that can govern the transition plans, and how we can bring all the stakeholders together for climate prosperity. Looking forward to Hamza's keynote as well in terms of climate prosperity plans. Thank you so much, Ubaid. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, for initially highlighting the need for the coordinated approach, the role of different stakeholders, ranging from the financing institutions, governments to the philanthropic organizations and these partners as well, particularly when we're looking into the mobilization of climate finance under such platforms. And yes, the area that you kind of also ended it to it when we're discussing this topic, a very closely linked topic within the financial ecosystem of countries, particularly the vulnerable or developing countries, that what eventually feeds the country platform is the climate prosperity plans. Especially for these vulnerable communities that are aiming to shift from these climate victimhood to climate leadership. So, and again, grateful that we have Hamza Haroon Saab with us. Hamza Haroon Saab is the Regional Director, South Asia at Climate Vulnerability Forum. He's joining us as a keynote speaker and is also leading the climate prosperity plan work in Pakistan. So thank you so much, Hamza Saab, for joining us. And yes, you have already shared the screen. So with this, it's over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ubaid, for inviting me here. And thank you to Dr. Khalid for a wonderful, setting the scene presentation that he has given. I also want to thank Dr. Sajid Amin and Saira for organizing all of this as well. So truly, truly grateful. I'm really excited about this conversation. This is something that's very close to our organization because we do believe that implementation at the end becomes critical. And the two components that Dr. Khalid has mentioned, the national ownership of a strategy and having the political will to implement that national strategy is critical. Without that, we'll continue to do fly in, fly out models, and it's not going to work, not just for Pakistan, but for many of our developing countries in the global south. So what I would love to do is I'd love to introduce a little bit about V20, go into the climate prosperity plan, the work we're doing, what is it, how does it work, and then go into how a country platform fits into this entire spectrum and how we believe it does meet the challenges that many of our countries face. So a very quick introduction, V20 is a intergovernmental agency of 74 countries. Majority of them are from the global south. On the right-hand side, you can see the past chairs and the current chairs. Before we had Bangladesh and Ghana, and currently Prime Minister Mia Mottley is our chair, and our Secretary General is President Nasheed, and our Managing Director is Sarah Jane Ahmed, who's also doing some incredible work with us. Just want to give some understanding of the kind of work we do. So apart from the on-ground work that we do with countries such as Pakistan on creating, drafting climate prosperity plans, we also work on a lot of advocacy. And that advocacy is primarily targeted towards international finance architecture. So before I start, I want to just ask, Ubaid, if people can type on chat, I think it'll be good because people can interact as well. I just wanted to understand what you guys think of, climate vulnerability. What is it in your mind when you hear the word climate vulnerability? If you can chat and type what your thoughts are on that. And Ubaid, if you can help me, because I can't see the chat for some reason.
Yes, sure. I'm just as soon as they start typing, I'll let you know. But I think you'll have to kind of start on its own. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. What comes to mind when people say climate vulnerability? Nothing comes to mind. Oh well, we got something. No, that was bad.
Yeah, I think they'll be typing shortly. You can perhaps start
It's
from
okay.
different end. In the meanwhile, they'll be
Yeah,
typing something.
exposure. Yeah, brilliant. I think that's great, Archie. I think you looked at my slide already. Inability to progress in the wake of climate change, absolutely. So, as you guys keep on typing, I'll tell you a very story that's very dear to my heart. When I was growing up, my father was in the Navy, and he would tell me stories about commanding big ships and going into the sea, and the sea state going to 5 and sea state going to 6. And he would say, look, the big boats figured a way out to weather through the storm, but the smaller boats had a very tough time. And I bring that back to the conversation when it is about climate vulnerability, about developing countries. And I think of developing countries, many of these global south countries, as smaller boats that are weathering the same storm as the big boats are. But they sometimes, a majority of the times actually, fail to course correct at the right time or diverge into a different path. And that exactly comes back to our definition of climate vulnerability, that it's not necessarily about geography, but it's about the capacity to weather the storm. And there are different things that come into it. It could be that those developing countries are going through differentiated, disproportionate impacts. They have economic strains that they can't weather through. They have access gaps when it comes to technology that they can't figure out because the storm's too large, is too fast. And the recoveries are interrupted. In the case of Pakistan as well, in the 2022 floods, and I'm pretty sure with these floods as well, the recovery time is so long that it takes a while for these small boats to come back to the course that they were supposed to be on, because the aid comes in 24 to 36 months, or sometimes does not even come at all. Systemic barriers and scientific lack of capacity of understanding the data gaps, etc. So this is a good pivot to then move on to what's happening in the global scene. When we look at our V20 countries, we see that over time, this is a combined debt stock of our countries. It's increasing, it's not decreasing. What we also find is that in a report done in 2023, we found out that from developing countries, almost $200 billion worth of payments of interest and principal payments were leaving developing countries, going to developed countries. And only 40 billion approximately was coming in. But out of that 40 billion, only 2 billion was concessional, meaning that the rate of that loan was lower than the medium term, long term growth rate of that country. So it's not sustainable for these countries to be having only $2 billion worth of concessional loans while stemming out $200 million from developing into developed countries. So that's the second thing to remember. You have high debt and you have payments going out of these countries rather than coming back in. The third thing to remember at the global stage is that the cost of capital for many of these vulnerable countries is extremely high. So if you have a green initiative that you want to do in Maldives, it is probably going to be costlier there than it is in Spain. So there's a discrepancy there as well. So you have high debt, you have money flowing out, and you have high cost of capital. So then you also look at the donor, sort of landscape, and you see that also going down. Total ODA will approximately decline by 14 to 21% by 2027. So then you need to change the conversations of that mindset, that a grant-based project is more important than a project which has a business cycle. That's another thing to keep in mind, because the structures, the capacity of donor funds coming up is also going to decrease. So now you have 4 things to worry about. And the 5th thing to worry about is that combined, our voice and representation in the forums that are actually impacting us the most is very low. So if you look at the vulnerable 20 countries, which is 70 countries, the voting power of 70 countries in IMF is 6.8%. That's the voice we have. In the MDB system, it's 8.6%. Now compare that to some of the other groups, and you'll see a clear discrepancy. So this is the scene, this is the international landscape that in Pakistan needs to be understood, because this will then let you understand why a national investment strategy is critical. Because if we don't strategize, if we don't have a whole of government programmatic approach to things, we will continue to struggle and we will continue to, go into different directions because the storm is going to keep on coming. I was reading an article about Pakistan and floods, and we're currently going through floods. This is going to become a new norm, so we need to figure out a way to move forward. One of the things that the Ministry of Finance has tasked us to do in Pakistan is to create a national investment strategy, which we call the Climate Prosperity Plan. So we are currently working on a bunch of climate prosperity plans, including Pakistan. And this investment strategy is a low carbon climate resilient development pathway, as Dr. Khalid was also talking about, that focuses on both development, climate, and reducing that technology access gap and those vulnerability factors that I mentioned at the beginning that then create a lack of capacity. I'm not going to go through all of the slide, but basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a national strategy for Pakistan and many other countries. What we also figured out is that the current flows in our countries every year around $90 billion. And when we did a research on it, we figured out that our vulnerable countries need over 5 times more money that's coming in. So that's another factor to keep in mind, that not only do we need international resource mobilization, we also need local resource mobilizations to create that investments and to create that jobs that are important for our countries, including Pakistan. You can also see some of the climate prosperity plans that have already been done. We're updating a few of them because the landscape in these countries has also changed. Now comes the important part that we're all here to discuss. What is a country platform? In our minds, and Dr. Khalid also mentioned this, when you create a national investment strategy, you need to have a delivery vehicle that helps implement that national strategy. Because in many of our countries, we have incredible plans. We have plans that have all sorts of graphs, that have all sorts of analysis, but they casually sit on the cabinet of every office, the government office you go and visit. We need a strategy that gets into implementation, and as mentioned before, has the political will, has the ambition, and has the commitment beyond federal level and beyond one government. These are two very important points, because most of our plans are made at federal level and then they stay at federal level and do not take into account, especially in the case of Pakistan, the provincial agenda and the provincial challenges and the provincial development agenda. So the way we envision country platforms is that on the top right, you can see some of the activities that the country platform needs to perform, which includes development of bankable project pipelines to have that local resource mobilization and international resource mobilization, investor engagement, and all these other things, access to climate finance, to then have the outcomes that are necessary to have a successful national investment strategy and a country platform, which is then to have green industrial policy and strategy development, carbon market access, both 6.2, 6.4, regional international cooperation, South-South cooperation, and also how do we bring the North as well in this, because there's a lot of technology that can be, technology gaps that can be fulfilled when we have those, partnerships. And one thing that we're working a lot on already is CDRFI, the Climate Disaster Risks Management Insurance Strategy. We're working with Global Shield already to kind of fill those gaps that we see in Pakistan. And this is something that's already happening. I know Dr. Crispian will speak about it as well, and I'm so glad that he's here on the call because he's doing some phenomenal work and his team is doing some phenomenal work on this topic in organizing a Global South and getting to a point where we can talk about some of the best practices and some of the tailored approaches needed for these governments. But in Ghana already, the CVF V20 has been working with the President's Office to create a country platform which brings that whole of government programmatic approach to a national investment strategy. So on the left-hand side, you can see the bilateral funding sources, the multilateral funding sources, the vertical climate funds, the FDIs and private sector, all feeding into a pipeline of bankable projects. Now, where does this pipeline of bankable projects come from? It comes from the layer up top, where you have all the major ministries that are part of creating that enabling environment and getting people together, and then having the right transaction advisory, early stage capital, macro models, regulation and policy, and then having sector specific initiatives, and then underneath them, the capacity to build more initiatives as needed under one strategy. That is the national strategy. This is already happening. And as part of the climate prosperity plan that we're building in Pakistan, we're also already in discussions with the government, especially the Ministry of Finance, on how does a country platform for Pakistan looks like. Now, it has to be tailored. It cannot just be a replication of something that's happening in another country. It has to cater for the provincial autonomies on different topics that Pakistan works on. It has to cater for potential future local governance model that can come in Pakistan. It has to cater for the different development agendas of those provinces as well. And it has to have the right private sector linkages, the right vertical fund linkages to ensure that something like this comes together. So, to summarize, as I said in the beginning, the fly in, fly out model and multilaterals coming into ministries and telling them that, for the next year, I think this is the strategy that we should take, is not going to work. The small boat is going to continue to wither away in different directions if we don't have a national strategy, a North Star to go towards. So I'll stop here. Thank you once again to STPI for having me and for having such incredible panelists. And I look forward to the discussions that are coming up. Over to you, Ben.
Yes, thank you so much, Hamza Saab, for perfectly pitching the case for the country platforms, initially taking on with the challenges with the financial flows for the developing countries that they face, and then creating a very perfect scene for the country platforms and highlighting the role. And thank you for the role that you're playing for the climate prosperity plans of the countries as well. So let me just very quickly ask if any of our panelists have, before we go towards the roundtable, anything quick to respond to Hamza or any key questions. For Hamza, if you have, feel free to let me know. If Dr. Crispin, if you want to add on anything at this point. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to come in when the panel discussion starts.
Sure, perfect. Sure, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Crispin. So with this, let's move towards the roundtable discussion, and for its scene setting, let me very quickly request our colleague Nisma to do a quick scene setting presentation for the roundtable, and with that, we'll be moving forward with Ms. Sobia, Dr. Crispin, and the colleagues from Arena and WISE as well. Yeah. So Nisma, with this, it's over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. If you can just put it in the slide share mode.
Yeah. Is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so thank you, Beth, and good afternoon or morning to everyone. I'm Nisma Rizwan, currently working as a research associate at STPI. And I guess my job here today is to set the stage for our discussion that will follow around our country platforms. So following Dr. Khalid's detailed remarks and Hamza's presentation around climate vulnerability, prosperity plans, I'll sort of zoom back out and try to give everything that has been said a structural form to, let's say, build a basic understanding for participants that are new to the topic before we dive deeper into it through the roundtable discussion that follows. So I think we're all well aware of the climate challenges or vulnerabilities we're facing on a global level now, and how climate finance plays a pivotal role in tackling them. So according to estimates from the Climate Policy Initiative, an estimated $400 billion is required per year through to 2030 to meet the NDC commitments of 110 parties to the Paris Agreement. So of this, around 69% will be dedicated to mitigation, 21% to adaptation and resilience, and the remaining 10% to cross-cutting initiatives. However, these resources that seem huge are negligible compared to those required to actually stay within the 1.5 degrees Celsius target set under the Paris Agreement. So the actual investment required amounts to around $7.5 trillion, per year between now and 2030, increasing to $8.8 trillion per year by 2050. So when we looked at the trend of climate finance flows within the past few years, or say following the Paris Agreement, there has been an overall increase with the flows picking up pace, particularly between 2021 and 2023. This has been made possible largely through the increased scale and maturity of financial markets, the growing presence of multilateral funds like the GCF, and the creation of new and innovative financing tools to diversify the financial pool. So when we look at the current climate financial architecture, I'd say, the main contributors of finance are developed countries, or mainly the global north, that provide resources directly through bilateral funds, leveraging their international development financing aid agencies, or through multilateral institutions such as UN bodies, the Global Environment Facility, or the Green Climate Fund. These bilateral and multilateral agencies sort of interact with each other as well to increase the scale of resources and enforcement. Then the funds are transferred directly to project developers in a recipient country, or go through respective national funds or designated authorities there, as I think our speakers before me have also discussed. So these resources may come from public, private, or philanthropic sources within donor countries, and may be transferred through let's say, a wide array of instruments. Some of the most common ones include grants, concessional loans, results-based financing, in-kind payments for, let's say, technology transfer, guarantee and equity mechanisms, and now to a certain extent from carbon markets as well. So while the current climate finance architecture offers a variety of sources and instruments, it has become too complex as well, as I think Dr. Khalid explained very well. In a sense, it is quite fragmented. There are dozens of established as well as emerging funds on national, regional, and international levels, each with their own targets and implementation modalities. Application processes are often long, technical, and resource intensive. There are many overlapping roles and inefficiencies, such as uneven distribution of flows as well. And I think most of all, many countries struggle to prepare bankable projects that satisfy donor requirements. So as a result, we're now seeing a gradual shift in the global debate. There's growing recognition that piecemeal, donor-driven projects cannot deliver the scale of transformation that is required, especially in developing countries. So financial contributors are now increasingly prioritizing country-led long-term programmatic initiatives that are accompanied by meaningful reforms. And again, as Dr. Khalid said, this is where country platforms come in. So in essence, they're nationally owned multi-stakeholder coordination and financing mechanisms that align domestic policy priorities with international support. The idea is to bring together national and international governments, development partners, the private sector, and civil society on a single platform to streamline access to required investments by reducing a duplication of effort across donors. So this also allows the mobilization of diverse sources of capital and to align them with a domestically established project pipeline based on national strategies and needs rather than donor preferences. So basically, the platform acts as an intermediary between donors and recipients to regulate and ease the engagement process itself. At present, there's no official, say, demarcation of the type of country platforms yet, but based on literature, some classifications have been made, and there are mainly 4 categories, I'd say. The first is the development of multi-sector platforms aligning mitigation and adaptation pipelines with development goals. I'd say an easy example of this is the Climate Prosperity Plan that Hamza discussed earlier. The second type would be like taking a sector-focused approach with potential for scaling, such as the Just Energy Transition Partnerships that have already been discussed very deeply as well, which countries like South Africa, Indonesia, and Vietnam have developed, where the focus rests entirely on one sector, which here is the transition away from coal and towards a clean energy sector in an equitable manner. The third option is mainly for countries that have already developed domestic climate funds. They can simply use these to coordinate activities under the country platform as well. And the fourth option is to leverage country principles, and let's say the principles embedded in international and regional initiatives that already exist, such as the Green Climate Fund or various adaptation funds. There are some countries that have been working on this as well. This kind of eases the process of implementation and integration, so it's a good option. But I believe the participants in our roundtable will be able to elaborate further and much better on these. So I'll leave it here. But just before finishing, I'd like to just talk a little bit from the Pakistani perspective as well. Pakistan requires around $348 billion by 2030 to address its climate and development challenges, of which nearly 200 billion must go to deep decarbonization. So far, we've only been able to mobilize close to $1.5 billion, most of which comes from the recent IMF resilience facility. At present, our climate finance landscape is also fragmented, debt-heavy, and insufficient. Projects, as Dr. Khalid indicated, are often designed in isolation, while systemic reforms and large-scale investments remain underfunded. So in such a scenario, especially since the current donor landscape or system is also somewhat difficult at the moment, it is worth exploring country platforms as a catalyst to build a, let's say, a coherent investment pipeline that also aligns with emerging domestic efforts, which is basically what our roundtable discussion today seeks to do. So I'll leave it here and we can move on to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nisma. You again, thank you for highlighting these figures as well. And I believe with this, we'll be moving towards a roundtable discussion. So again, taking lead from the concept note and the questions that we already have, and also the points that have been raised in the first initial talk. So let me initially invite Ms. Sobia Becker. Ms. Sobia, thank you so much for joining us, and you have been working on a lot of these country platforms. So perhaps very first, since at the very start, we'll be looking more into what has been done in different countries and what different experiences are. So perhaps the first question from you is that in developing countries, what have been, or in overall, what have been different experiences around the country platforms? What do CPs offer that other financial mechanisms have not been able to do so far? And what unique values do you think they add that makes them increasingly relevant to developing countries like Pakistan? So yeah, again, further, if you want to respond to any of the other points, speaking globally, so please feel free to do so. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Abed. It's always a pleasure to join STPI and other colleagues in these discussions. I'm very happy to respond to the question that you just put up to me, but if you'll allow me a brief segue to the presentation that we started with, Hamza's presentation.
Sure.
As I was listening through, and there's some very good points that were made by the Climate Vulnerable Forum, but I think it's also important to look back at the experiences that we've already made in Pakistan and unpack what went well, what didn't go so well, and learn from them. So the Climate Prosperity Plan is not going to be the first such intervention in Pakistan. The NDC partnership had the partnership plan, which was also going to be an overarching framework that was going to identify the priority actions and then also identify financing partners, and also establish the sources of finance and secure financing commitments. So the question right now would be, what can the Climate Prosperity Plan learn from the partnership plan, and then adjust moving forward? And in moving forward, I think that there are 4 key political economy related issues that would need to be kept in mind. So the first and foremost is national ownership versus donor influence. Now, country platforms are always very attractive. And one of the reasons that makes them even more attractive, especially for development partners, is national leadership. And this is really a credibility test where certainly international development partners and all concerned stakeholders need to see how engaged and how involved the domestic ministries, the parliament as an example, and the civil society, how engaged are they, and do they feel real ownership? This would be the $1 million question. The second critical issue pertains to institutional fragmentation. We see it in a range of activities that we have in Pakistan, and what it always boils down to is a lack of clarity, a high degree of institutional fragmentation. You have multiple ministries, you have regulators, you have provinces. Very often there are competing priorities, and therefore any country platform's governance model has to streamline these roles while still allowing for inclusivity and and higher participation. The third most important thing is policy credibility. And this is very important from an international development perspective, where donors and any investors, because there was also talk about sustainable finance, blended finance, and philanthropy. So donors and investors will only commit at scale if they do see durable reforms and not short-term political signals. And unfortunately, it's only when we have black swan events that the political leadership sees the value in implementing whole of government and whole of society approaches, but not before that. Which brings me to the final point, which is one of distributional justice. Any transition, regardless whether it's an energy transition or whatever sort of deep, meaningful change that all of us would like to see, this shift has costs, and it also has benefits across regions, across sectors, and across social groups. And any country platform must integrate all of these elements, must integrate social protection and just transition to avoid any sort of pushback. So this was just a reaction to some of the opening remarks that I had heard. Ubaid, you asked me about other experiences, and you named specifically one or two other country platforms. So I would now like to come to the question that you've posed to me. Right now, as advisor to the Pakistan-German Climate and Energy Partnership, we are working on supporting the government with a range of issues related to better alignment with Paris, and also with respect to taking the next level of, for example, the NDCs or the LT-LEDs, taking them to the next level of maturity. Pakistan is the first ever partnership that was established by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And since that time, from COP26 onwards, there are a number of other partnerships that have also been established. And I'd like to reflect on those experiences, as well as in my previous life when I used to work for the FCDO, the Just Energy Transition Partnerships in South Africa, Indonesia, and Vietnam. Firstly, the German-India Energy Partnership really shows the value of trust and technical cooperation before scaling into finance. So from this particular experience, we see that subnational governments hold real power. So any platform has to respect these federal structures and not just central mandates. And this is something that is particularly critical for Pakistan, as the implementation of climate action lies within the provincial domains and not at the federal level, which has more of a policy setting role. In South Africa, we saw that the Just Energy Transition Partnership in South Africa, but also in Indonesia and Vietnam, it underlined the power of political signaling. Billions were pledged because they were framed as nationally owned reforms with donor backing. But in time, certain risks were also revealed, risks as well as local realities. So, for example, like Eskom's debt or the coal lock-in. And when these risks and realities are ignored, then platforms very quickly become only donor-driven and they lose legitimacy. So the big lesson would be that headline ambition must match credible domestic reform packages from all the way from, for example, in the case of energy, from tariff reform through to the just transition planning. The Friends of Renewable Energy in Indonesia, often referred to as FIRE, it showed the importance of broad coalitions. So it brought together the government, the private sector, and civil society. But since there were no binding mechanisms, progress was limited despite having a very high degree of political will and willingness. So for Pakistan, for a country platform to succeed, this means that coalition building has to translate into structured investment pipelines as well as clear governance rules. So when we look at the totality of this picture, and thinking back to what I thought were the four key political economy messages that we have, it's very clear that in Pakistan, for any country platform to really succeed, it needs to balance national ownership with donor support. It has to embed the notion of social justice and the just transition to manage distributional impacts. And you need to streamline fragmented institutions to demonstrate durable reforms. And this needs a range of measures, but most of all, it needs significant buy-in, provincial, federal level, and there also has to be a mechanism which ensures that there's a top-up process, a top-down process, but also a bottom-up process in order to make it inclusive and participatory. So if we think of, I'll just speak to, for example, if we were going to establish an energy platform, a country platform for Pakistan, just taking that as an example, this would mean that you focus on 2 or 3 catalytic gaps. These could be grid reform or coal to solar swaps or industrial decarbonization, and then work together to consolidate strategies like the long-term low emissions development strategy, and also to look at the climate prosperity plan and see this under one umbrella. And again, I'd like to highlight this point again, that having the climate prosperity plan in a silo without seeing the integration with the LT-LEDs or the NDC is going to again run into the same sort of issues that we've seen in the past. It's only when Pakistan speaks with a single credible investment voice to its partners, its development partners, investors, it's only then can we make real gain. And I think I'll pause here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Sobi. And again, very right. The national ownership that you talked about, the just transition angle you talked about are extremely important. Thank you so much for these suggestion recommendations as well. And I think that also kind of provides the point where we would like to invite Dr. Crispin over. Doctor, just to kind of very briefly introduce, most of us know him here. He's the senior fellow at the World Resource Institute. So Dr. Crispin, coming to you, I mean, in reference to the points that have been made earlier, if you want to add anything, but particularly what we're looking at is a very key feature when you talk about the country platforms is the national ownership. But I mean, are the ground realities any different when it comes to implementation? Is it crucial to strike a balance between the national ownership and the donor alignment? And if so, what approaches do you think work best to achieve this so that neither party, I mean, kind of gets the short end of the stick? And also, is it possible to design these platforms in a way that they're both ambitious enough to mobilize global support, yet realistic enough to reflect the local institutional and financial capacities for the developing countries as well? And so with this, Dr. Crispin, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Obaid, and well done on your expert facilitation of this meeting, and my appreciation to SDPI for pulling this together. So, I mean, I have to say we've had 4 really excellent inputs to kick us off, and I can only but agree with what Khalid, Hamza, Nisma, and Sabias have said. I've been an external observer of these V20 climate and prosperity plans, and I really want to congratulate the V20 for pushing them forward. I think it's a brilliant way of bringing the climate and development agendas together and laying the groundwork for moving forward and putting a platform together. And to sort of echo what the previous speakers have said, I mean, I think, our experience in South Africa is that the platform approach was a very useful mechanism. It forced us to think in a long-term programmatic way about the kind of system transformation that we're trying to achieve. And as many of you said, combine, concrete investment packages with policy reforms that drive change. So that was an extremely useful part of it. And linking that to an integrated financing strategy. So instead of stacking up our funders one by one and, doing individual grant programs and lending programs with a variety of institutions, approaching it as a whole. And just to underline the point, so, when we put our investment plan together as South Africa, the total investment requirement, this was primarily on grid infrastructure and new generation capacity. The total investment requirement was about $100 billion. What we were able to raise through the JETP was 8.5. So less than 10% of what we needed came through the JETP, and it underlines the importance of thinking beyond simply what you can squeeze out of a set of bilateral donor relations, and thinking about how, using the cascade principle, we can unlock private debt and equity into the energy transition at the right scale. So, for me, the country platform really is a model that's fit for the times that we're in. We've got much narrower fiscal space, both domestically and in our development partners. There's much less concessional finance on the table, and we need to think creatively about how we use the scarce resources that we have to go to scale. So, to turn to your question, this issue of national ownership is, we all say it. So country platforms need to be nationally owned, nationally led, aligned with our national strategies. Let me say, in practice, that is a contested principle. Even though development partners, will officially espouse it, they come to the table with a wealth of technical resources and capacity standing behind them. And unless you're able to, in a sense, pre-arm yourself, so, bring in early stage advice and have the wherewithal to come to the table and do these complex negotiations, you're going to get outmaneuvered at the end of the day. And, for our government, it was it's fundamentally important that you basically come to the table. You've got to take charge of this thing. You've got to lead it from the top. I mean, typically, that includes head of state involvement. There are many contesting line ministry interests that have to be navigated. And, you know, we found trade and industry, national treasury, the energy department, the mineral resources department, the environment department, all pulling in different directions. And you need to bring the political capital to the table to force those ministries into a cooperative relationship. And then at a global level, to forge the compacts that need to underpin the resource mobilization strategy. So, you know, for developing countries to be aware, this is a contested space, despite what people say. You need to own and lead the thing, otherwise it's going to unravel. And if it's not integrated into your national plans and into your national political economy, ultimately there's going to be a political pushback. So that brings me to the second part of the question you were raising, which is, you know, does ambition match local reality? I would say bluntly, you know, what you can't do with a platform is have foreign donors buying your ambition. Politically, that's an unsustainable position. And the minute that happens, you get a level of political pushback inside the country that ultimately unravels the platform that you're developing. So whatever ambition you've got to, whatever ambition is embedded within a platform must be based on your national development interests. It mustn't go beyond it. You can use the platform to create, you know, some high-level mobilization around implementation and bringing the resources to the table. But, you know, the bottom line is drive this in line with national development priorities, and, you know, link it to national plans, NDCs, LT-LEDs, your climate and prosperity plan. So, you know, all of those plans create the foundation for driving those platforms. I do want to just make a last point about, you know, so it's very important when you're setting up a platform to think about how you're going to create the political coordination that's needed. And I completely agree with what Sabaya was saying about inclusion and social justice. So you want to bring other stakeholders to the table, you want to bring different line ministries to the table, and you want to engage subnational governments. And, you know, there's a very important role that they play in terms of implementation. So that's very important, setting up these coordination structures. But underneath that, you've got to have a dedicated, highly technical capacity to originate bankable projects and to match them with the available financing. And those kinds of skills are typically found in, you know, the National Development Bank. So, you know, you've got the National Bank of Pakistan and the State Bank. That's typically where you would find those kind of resources to set up this dedicated implementation unit that's got to drive the platform. I'll leave it at that and come back later on any other questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Crispin. That was really insightful. And I believe hearing you, Subia, as well as Hamza, I think there's a common recommendation that's coming up. But yeah, we'll come to it later. But let's kind of move to both Farhan and Elvin, especially when we talk about the renewable energy transition. So perhaps first I'll come to Mr. Farhan Rana. Farhan is an associate program officer at the Renewable Energy Finance and Policy at International Renewable Energy Agency. Irina, thank you, Farhan, for joining us. And maybe primarily a question from you is more about how these, again, such platforms can be evolved as a tool for scaling the energy transition in these either we call it climate vulnerable or developing countries, and if we have any lessons that can be drawn from these other countries. When we're talking about these renewable energy uptake, talking about any of the early retirement mechanism. So Farhan, if we can initially come to you, also if you want to respond to any of the points previously highlighted as well. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Ubaid, and thank you so much to you and the team for inviting me to this very useful discussion. So yeah, before I answer your question on, I guess, what lessons we can extract from some of the other energy-specific country platforms, yeah, just wanted to quickly react to the very insightful presentations that were made earlier, and also echo the remarks made by earlier speakers. And by the way, also touch on, I think you asked how country platforms might be different to existing financial mechanisms. So I think IRENA works quite close to that space on financial mechanisms for clean energy projects. So as you may know, we are one of the co-custodians of SDG 7 on universal, affordable, and reliable access to clean energy. And back in July, we published the Tracking SDG 7 report together with the IEA, the World Bank, the UN, and the World Health Organization, which are the co-custodians for this indicator. So the reason I mention this is as part of the report, we track SDG 7.A.1, which looks specifically at international public flows from developed to developing countries in support of clean energy projects. So this could be money through bilateral channels or multilateral channels. So whether it's government of China funding a solar PV plant or hydro plant in Pakistan, or whether it's World Bank or ADB committing some money for grid infrastructure, we track all these projects. And when we look at these projects, we see that since 2010, these donors have provided almost $10 billion US. So first of all, I think given the investment needs, there were a few different numbers that were shared earlier. I think something like 350 billion was shared, not just for the energy sector, but for climate needs as a whole. But 10 billion is really a drop in the ocean when you really think of Pakistan's energy needs. In addition, most of the support is actually debt-based, which is, as you know, not ideal for Pakistan given its long-standing debt vulnerabilities. And grants, in fact, actually made less than 1.5%. So just to throw some of these key figures at you, which are quite concerning given the pressing energy needs in the country, and the lack of scale when it comes to international public finance, and also the quality of finance, which is predominantly debt-based and not so much in the form of grants, which is something that would really help alleviate some of these debt vulnerabilities. But what is very apparent in addition to that, when you look at these projects, and this is something that previous speakers have, of course, mentioned, is that existing efforts have been very fragmented. We tracked almost 30 different donors supporting more than 150 clean energy projects in Pakistan since 2010. And while particular projects do find success, these efforts have not led to an enabling environment that makes Pakistan's renewable energy sector investable as a whole. So, because there are systemic challenges that need to be addressed, and addressing those systemic challenges, it requires a very coordinated and choreographed approach, which, as speakers mentioned, it needs a whole of government and whole of society lens. We need to work together with the international partners, international financiers, domestic financiers, civil society, and the local community as well. And perhaps this is exactly where country platforms can offer something different. So the speakers mentioned in a country platform, you may have all these key elements, mainly strong country leadership, strong country ownership, political agreement between government and international partners, a coordination mechanism that brings together all these actors, brings together relevant ministries, relevant subnational governments, as well as access to a diverse set of financial resources, especially in the form of grants and concessional financing. So if a platform is able to bring all this together and achieve a coordinated, systematic, and sequential approach, then I think that could be very useful. We could really move from this project specific approach that Pakistan has seen to a more programmatic approach that makes the whole energy transition more investable in the country. Now, with that in mind, let me just come to your question on what lessons we can derive from some of the other countries that we've seen that have enacted these country platforms. And perhaps I'll just talk about Indonesia, which has also been working on its Just Energy Transition Program, and some of the lessons that we have, I guess, derived from the progress seen so far. So first of all, it's very important to set ambitious but achievable targets. And these need to be supported by proper planning and proper technical modeling. Because in the case of Indonesia, what donors in the country realized much later on is that their coal dependency was a lot larger and a lot more complex than was initially acknowledged. As you may know, Indonesia has a lot of nickel mining reserves, and even after this agreement, the country continued to build captive coal plants, particularly for nickel mining, because they plan to develop a whole EV supply chain in the country. So what happened was the initial targets had to be revised due to this unforeseen coal-fired capacity that had to still come online. And revising these goals is, of course, it has a high administrative and administrative cost and time-specific costs. So that's the first lesson learned, that set ambitious goals, set clear goals that are grounded in proper energy planning and proper stakeholder engagement with all levels of the government. And second is it's the coherence with the national regulation and laws. So at the time, Indonesia actually had a law which governs the sale of assets at a loss. Bloomberg reported that basically this law states that you are not allowed to sell government-owned assets below their book value, which actually made it very difficult to sell and disband coal assets. There was the Pelabuhan Ratu power plant, which was expected to be closed down, but faced significant delays. So this also slowed down the implementation of the JETP program. So these are some of the things that I think Pakistan could learn from when thinking specifically about their clean energy sector. And perhaps one recommendation I have already for SDPI in this regard is to engage. I mean, this is a really important, great step that we're talking about this, but to further engage with some of these governments, some of these government counterparts who have worked on these JETPs and really extract the lessons learned so that we can learn from it and we can implement those findings into however this country platform shapes to be. So I'll stop here. Thank you so much, and happy
thank you
to come
so much, Farhan, for responding to the question that were really important, and also the recommendation that you last made. And yes, this is something that's already in plan, and we'll hopefully after this dialogue, we'll get back to you with the overall broader program that we have. So with this coming to Alan, I believe the question is the same as we kind of asked from Farhan regarding energy transition, but perhaps adding a bit to it. I mean, if you have a kind of a perspective, whether we should kind of go for a focused energy platform or maybe combine it with the climate, like in terms of which is likely to have a bigger or a quicker impact as well. But if again, Alvin, if you'd like to respond to any of the previous points as well, and after you will be moving towards the national perspective, and also Mr. Arki Gilmore, if you'd like to perhaps later respond to the same question as well. But firstly, Alvin, over to you.
Thanks, Ubaid, and thanks again to SDPI to invite SC for All for this very interesting discussion. I think just first I'll just go a bit on the previous discussions. I think I do agree on many of the points made. I think one of the key things to say is that yes, country platforms are important, right? I think that is an important one. I think the question is now is becoming more clearly is what kind of country platforms do we need? It's kind of an interesting thing that is happening when the global multilateral architecture was kind of centralized, while the countries were kind of moving away from centralized money flow to decentralized money flows, like, kind of moving from the multilaterals, then bilaterals, then, different kind of spheres, different kind of funds propped up. What has kind of that done to the global architecture, especially at the country level, is that it has really distracted the institutions to how to really handle all of this. And I think it is very important to kind of distinguish the financing needs into kind of three real terms of money, essentially. Of course, there is a grant component, and then there is the financing needs, right? Very specifically, if you really look at grants, it is not new that governments get grants to do three types of same technical assistance policy studies or some sort of evaluations or assessment, etc. It is not unheard of, right? And these typically would sit with three different ministries or three different departments, right, doing the same work essentially, but the grant money is kind of dispersed. So here I think somewhere there is a responsibility among multilateral donors, and I think at some level this has to be pushed by the countries themselves to kind of give that feedback that this needs to be kind of better coordinated and let's say better funneled into the country. And this is where I think the next point on country platforms is there is a difference between political readiness and institutional readiness. I think the way country platforms were being set up was on the fact that there was a political readiness, right? There was a lot of energy and enthusiasm among the G7 that kind of cascaded into a lot of the countries that are important from an emission standpoint, getting into this framework. And there's a lot of thoughts already going around whether this has worked or this has not worked. I think it was a need of the hour at that time, because the issue is not that concessional lending is decreasing. When concessional lending was there, one question to ask is, have countries been able to access that concessional lending, right? So the issue is that concessional lending, that terms itself have become very, very unattractive to developing countries. So that's why this whole aspect that let's aggregate whatever was being really committed at the end of the day to countries in the next 20 years, let's kind of put it all together and put it into a time space of 10 years and see whether the countries bite it or not, right? That was the kind of approach. So it was basically what was already committed in a new package, which is fine, which is actually a good thing in a way. It kind of allows us to relook into efficiencies. The problem was that I think in a few of the countries that where this took on, and I think Farhan made a very good point on kind of detailed planning bit is that the political readiness allowed for an ambition setting, and that ambition setting quickly needed to have discussions in terms of okay, what does that mean, right? What does okay, I need $2 billion of investment. What does that really mean? And when you kind of try to break that down with the sector specific people, and they want to know what kind of capital cost assumptions were made, what kind of return on investment numbers are we looking at, things start becoming very difficult because ultimately they were not developed in the country. So the third main point for me is that the plan is not important that much. Where it is made is the most important. So we can have many kinds of plans, right? And there could be one kind of plan or a strategy that is better than the other. The question is, where is it made? And that's why I think institutional readiness and the focus of these country platforms is extremely important. And I think one of the missed opportunities here was that we have seen in some other multilateral agreements that try to solve very specific questions, such as persistent organic pollutants or the ozone layer, etc., where once the country commits that, okay, I would like to do this at a long term in a sustainable manner, uh, uh, countries are given an institutional strengthening grant. And that is an extremely important money, I think, that allows countries to start developing their institutions in terms of the exactly kind of the modeling setup that they need, the technical resources that they need to kind of invest in their ecosystems. Really, at the end of the day, like even pay experts that are local. So I think this kind of really is an important element in my view. Finally, I think another important area to think about is that when we think of raising capital, right, that's a completely different beast, right? Like if you really think about raising capital, that's a completely different piece of work. Now, here the question is like we are looking at numbers such as $350 billion. That is Austria's GDP where I'm sitting at right now, right? So the question is, out of that, who pays how much, right? So I think that's a very important question to think about. Grants help you to be institutionally ready, right? Technical assistance allow your projects to be bankable. Now, that money, would the government put that? I think there are certain sectors that the government can really come in. For example, sectoral interventions like electric charging infrastructure, right? That's something if the government invests, private sector can come in and really take it off. The participation of the private sector has been really lacking. And to be honest, I've not seen it in any of the country platforms. And so this kind of big money that what we're talking about really has to come from the private sector. And the lack of their engagement and participation and really what they would like to see is something that needs to kind of be encountered into this. Finally, I think on the question that Ubaid raised about how can we make sure that does an energy sector only plan is it a sectoral plan versus an all-encompassing plan? I think plans are good if they are clear and if they are precise. Muddying the water may not be super helpful. So it's a very thin line, right? Let me give you an example. Let's say if I make a power sector plan for the country, but if I only look at the power sector, and if I don't look at the electric or the transportation sector, where a big segment of electrification has to come in, right? The technologies are there, scalability is already there, everything is there. What about, let's say, the options in cooling that is going to come in, right? So these kind of different sectoral integrations are somehow needed to be integrated. Now, I don't have magic pill or to say that whether only one works or not. And at the end of the day, each country has to figure this out. And my final kind of point would be I think sometimes countries want to do things very fast, and this is because sometimes driven by, unfortunately, political realities or multilateral donors coming in. They have certain timelines. Going fast may not yield the best results. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alvin, for highlighting this point around the institutional readiness, institutional needs, and where do we exactly place it. And I think this also provides a very good way to go into the national context where we have both Mustafa and Sohail Malik Saab with us. So I'll firstly come to Mustafa. I mean, listening to the debate that we have been having around these platforms, what could perhaps work for Pakistan? I mean, I know it's again kind of a very difficult question, but what could perhaps work for Pakistan, and what would be required to kind of to make it work as well? And I think if you would like to highlight any point, particularly from Pakistan's context, how it should kind of look like. So with this, over to you, Mustafa. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ubaid. Thank you to STPI for arranging this. Again, some wonderful conversations. Honestly, learning a lot as well. So many different perspectives, yet most of them aligned, which is good to see. But nonetheless, I think from a Pakistani perspective, and as I'm tasked to provide that national insight into this conversation, I think there's little uh, there's little debate about whether we need a country platform or not. I think Pakistan might be one of those countries that would benefit the most from such a platform. Our needs are very unique. They're very well spelled out. Our inability to capitalize on the available climate finance and the avenues that exist has been well documented. The numbers are there, the population is there, the climate vulnerability is there. So on that note, again, I wouldn't delve too much on whether we need it or not. It's about what would work, how that has to be structured, and more importantly, you're looking at it in a very post-aid kind of a scenario. So again, in the current ecosystem, global capital is always looking for different avenues of investment, and those avenues essentially have to balance or have to provide reward to risk pathways very clearly. Risk to reward pathways very clearly aligned, very clearly spelled out. And in that sense, again, it's really important. I guess Hamza briefly talked about this in his presentation. But with global South economies, the perception of risk remains a very important bottleneck. So again, risk is perceived. And when it comes to the perception of risk for global South, it's always perceived as something that is bigger than what it actually is. And how do you actually go about de-risking that component of finance that essentially leads to what Hamza described as, millions in, billions out? It's essentially countries such as Pakistan to come up with very cohesive plans around investment, around regulatory structures, around policies that could then align for different investors to come in and provide the support that they require. So I have three things to kind of highlight here. The first, I think, again, really important for Pakistan is to understand the dynamics of climate change and how uniquely they position Pakistan for such a platform. Again, we've been unable to tap into the existing donor setups, the existing donor systems, GCF and such. We've been vying for those, but again, it hasn't really materialized at the level or in the manner that it was supposed to, partly because of how diverse our whole governance system is. So we have that federal government, we have the provincial government, we have different subjects, we have different ministries talking about different policies, and all of that requires a lot of alignment more locally. And that alignment has to come more politically. So there's that bit where I guess Alvin was also referring to, where we need a plan which is minimal, but it's the strength of that plan is in the implementability of it. So an excellent plan serves nothing if it's not implementable. And Pakistan has been able to produce some excellent plans over the past few years. Sophia mentioned about the NDC partnership. Again, we'll be providing another revision to the NDC. The LTLEDS is another one, climate prosperity plan. We have a Vision 2030, a Vision 2050. We have an excellent integrated generation capacity expansion plan that came out a few weeks ago. We have an EV policy. We have a renewable energy policy. All of those are excellent components. But when it comes to their overlap, we often see that one policy is totally independent of the other. The ownership of one policy is totally independent of what the other policy is talking about. It doesn't factor in those targets set for electric vehicles and how that would dictate energy planning for that matter. Even within different plans, the GDP assumptions are very different. So that fundamentally changes the baseline of how you want a progress to look like. So there's that bit where I think Pakistan could greatly benefit from coming together on a single investment plan. And then also, I think for Pakistan, it's also very important that this has to be beyond a single government. So again, usually governments often do not last the full period in terms of the constitutional period that they're awarded. But beyond that as well, there might even be sense for Pakistan to think of a bipartisan ownership of such plans and policies. Of late, given the climate disasters that the country is foreseeing, I think it's becoming more of an opportunity. It's becoming more of a reality as well, and I think that's where institutions such as the SIFC, which are made dedicatedly to facilitate investment coming into the country, and there's an increasing cognizance of investment going towards climate change, towards improving climate vulnerability. Even globally, I guess at this stage, most of the country platforms have energy transition front and center for those. And Pakistan should be no different in that case, I guess. In Pakistan, again, the need would be very different though. So our energy transition pathway wouldn't be about it's not about mobilizing large-scale investment for renewable energy projects anymore, given the ongoing solar rush that the country is experiencing. It has to do much more with flexibility. It has to do much more with the skills, with the capacity that is needed to run a flexible system. So kind of building on, I guess an earlier speaker, Alvin, probably talked about it as well, that we need very clear pathways of what role grants have to play, and then also the question of concessional and non-concessional finance. So commercial finance, where private sector has to play a role, has to have very clear investment pathways, and then the non-concessional finance and the grants have to play together to bring about that systemic change that is very essential over here. So the components might be there, but for that structural change that we require, a lot of donors contribute. Farhan gave us the numbers to Pakistan in providing pilots and providing structural support and capacity building for whatnot. But what Pakistan is missing is how to build on top of each other. Making sure that one policy, one plan is in tandem with the others, the ability for provinces to interact, for civil society, for think tanks to contribute. That's the real benefit that a country partnership platform can afford in this sense. And I guess Pakistan, if anything, is one of the best examples of how private finance can revamp the energy sector. Think the solar rush that is happening and how that has changed everything that was known to us as a reality. So in that sense, again, I think it's a very logical next step. But again, the implementation bit is the real challenge. It's not the planning part.
Yes, Mustafa, thank you so much for highlighting this. And I'll just take your point that you mentioned around the specific needs of Pakistan, and again, very pertinent. Let me come to Sohail Malik Saab. Then Sohail Saab is currently the technical team lead at Climate Resource and Coordination Center, but someone who has a vast experience working with the GCS. So Sohail Saab, talk now, since we're doing the national debate. So perhaps a bit of the same question, that how do we design a platform that is nationally owned? And I think Sobia raised a very important point. How does such plans ensure the transition, protect workers and the vulnerable communities as well, and not just achieve decarbonization? And the second question from you would be, like, for Pakistan, what innovative instruments, such as either we talk about the blended finance, any of the market-based approaches, can actually be prioritized for this? So thank you so much, sir, for joining us. And with this, over to you. And after Sohail Saab will be coming to Aki for your interventions.
Thank you very much, Ubaid. I really listened to all the earlier speakers, and they have covered very well. And I hope we can get the presentations, because they were very informative and very pertinent to the whole thing. First, let me just talk about the local, because I'm talking about the local context, and I have had a lot of experience. I'll come to GCF also. That why a country platform for Pakistan? I asked myself, why do we need a country platform for Pakistan? That would be the first question. The answer would be very simple, as I think mentioned by earlier speakers, that Pakistan is facing a dual crisis. One is climate vulnerability, and then the energy transition financing gap. So these two are there. Then The other thing is that Pakistan financing challenges are massive. I mean, you look at we need 348 billion. You know the figures very well. Everyone knows it by 2030, out of which 200 billion is for decarbonization. Now, this is a lot of money, and we have been running after debt financing, as mentioned by earlier speakers. We should not, because we are already debt stressed. Even if we get soft loan, I mean, that has to be bank financed. So that is the other challenge. The final challenge is that current access to climate finance is fragmented. It's project-based and limited in scale. So Pakistan risks being left behind if it doesn't move to a programmatic, platform-based approach. So, I mean, I'm just setting the context. So, I mean, if I talk about a platform-based approach, what a country platform should do? For me, for my very modest 40 years plus experience, first is the national ownership and coherence. That means aligning Pakistan's NDCs, NAP, CPP, whatever we have talked about, and energy transition plans into one coherent investment framework. That is one that the country platform should do. The second is that it should bridge to finance. So the country platforms should integrate public, private, and blended finance, which I mentioned just now, especially GCFs, MDBs, DFIs, and climate venture capital. And also it should have the platform should be there for an inclusive dialogue that brings together government, regulators, DFIs, private sectors, private investors, civil society, and academia. Without buy-in, I can assure you, we have done so many experiments over the last decades that the country platforms risk being donor-driven. I've stopped using the word donor. International partner-driven paper platforms. Let me label them as paper platforms. And finally, it's the operationalization, which is the icing on the cake, that move from concept to practice by developing a bankable pipeline of projects in the renewable energy field, in storage, green hydrogen, you name it, and in community resilience, most importantly. So having said so, I'll just quickly move on to what lessons can we learn, Pakistan can learn, and it has been mentioned, like lesson from South Africa, very straight lesson coming, that there are strong international pledges, but delivery slowed due to unclear governance and political shifts. Pakistan must avoid that. Then there's a lesson from Bangladesh. Platform success depends on clear national leadership and international partner coordination. So that's a lesson which we should also take into account. So what do we take away from these lessons? So that we should adapt models. Let's not copy them. Pakistan's country platform must reflect its unique institutional and political economy. So, going forward, I don't want to really repeat the same things. Going forward, the recommendations are that we anchor the country platform in the climate prosperity plan and give it a modest, well-defined mandate for the first 12 to 18 months, like investment plan plus 3 pilots. And I want to make a start which really scales up. This is just a personal recommendation. Then the most important point is that set up an independent secretariat or neutral convener. The convening power should be there with the independent secretariat. I mean, I can name, I can say STPI, CRCC, all those can come together and ensure that it's an independent platform to run the diagnostics, pipeline preparation, MRV, and investor outreach. I'm just naming a few things. And what you mentioned on the financing part, develop a blended finance stack and a private sector window. That's very important because private sector is being crowded out. So, I mean, we have talked a lot about, I'll just come to my final point, because we have talked a lot about country platforms and the country prosperity plan. I would have just, I mean, not dwelling into too much details, I would say the climate prosperity plan tells us where we want to go. I mean, that's what it is. And the country platform is how we get there. If we design the country platform as the operational arm of the country prosperity plan, we can turn Pakistan's climate ambition into bankable finance, investor trust, and real benefits for our people. I'll just stop here because I think a lot of the things have been.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sohail. Somehow that was really, really interesting, and we would have really loved to hear more from you. Let me just come to actually one of the questions that we have been kind of wondering previously, and also kind of really given the changing role, given the changing financial architecture, if you would like to kind of respond to anything that should be the key changing role of the development financing institutions for country platforms, if you would like to kind of respond to this, and if you can also speak a bit on the country platform models and ambitions that we talked about. So yes, with this, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ubaid, and thank you to the to STPI and to the previous speakers for a very fascinating discussion. My name is Archie Gilmore. I work for ODI, a think tank in London, but temporarily working with the Presidential Climate Commission in South Africa, along with Crispian, on country platforms for the past couple of years. It's been a pretty extraordinarily consensus panel, I think. So rather than add or repeat to much of what's been said, I just add a little bit about these different country platform models. And again, sort of that sort of fundamental principle of country ownership means that as we think about the ambition of a country platform or what these different models should be, that this is ultimately down to Pakistan or to the country in question. And if you think about the development of the country platform, break it down into stages, I think those first couple of stages where you're initially setting the scope and defining the ambition, that is where some of that work gets done. I think an important part of that in so many countries, and especially in Pakistan perhaps, will be to have a very strong fiscal assessment part of that, to make sure that the any financing plans are done without sort of tipping into unsustainable debt burdens or taking on more than they should, or to use as many innovative solutions as possible. But I think, I mean, to the ambition, I mean, again, it's for the country to decide, but there's no reason that there shouldn't be multiple country platforms eventually, or there's no reason that everything needs to be taken all at once. I think, I mean, personally, I would advise having learning from the existing platforms, the existing plans, and conversations with countries that are looking into this, not to try to take on too broad a sort of multi-sectoral thing, trying to get all of these incredibly massive investment needs sorted at once. The country platform, as has been said, I mean, it's about taking that technical work and the ambition and turning it into bankable plans and getting it done, over the sort of 3 to 5 or 7 years. And once you've sort of proven the concept and the institutional setup and the sectoral goals, you can then repeat the process probably much more easily. And with that in mind, I mean, going to sort of thinking a little bit about those different models, I think the Nawefi model in Egypt is another pertinent example to follow. The nexus for water, food, and energy. Plenty of things to learn from it as well, and not to repeat. I mean, this is not about taking a model and just applying it, but adapting models, as has been said already. But in Egypt, the goals are arguably smaller. I mean, they decided on the energy pillar to take, right, let's going to do 10 gigawatts of renewable energy and take away 5 gigawatts of fossil fuels. And then they started into it, and they've been implementing the energy pillar pretty successfully. Arguably, of all the country platforms that exist, I mean, most of the more progress has been made in Egypt and perhaps South Africa than in any other. And once they've reached that progress, I think it'll be eminently possible to then, within the context of Egypt's plans and transition plans and NDCs, to then build into a next stage or even build in a new platform. I mean, South Africa has its energy transition plan, but it's now pursuing the option of an adaptation platform as a sort of separate but still very connected idea about how to take on a programmatic approach to a different set of country priorities. All of this, I think, makes it pretty pertinent to remember that the role of DFIs. I mean, a lot of the conversation about country platforms, I think, has been partly motivated by the desire to reform this global financial system with MDBs at their heart. I think that is vital. Country platforms is a part of that, but it also depends on successful reform. That said, they will also undoubtedly depend on MDBs going forward. Every single country platform does, even the JETPs, even if it's just through institutional support to the secretariats or to providing the channels for the guarantees by the bilateral donors, or indeed providing this with the main expertise and main delivery partner for a whole pillar of a country platform, as in Egypt. It is vital that the MDBs reform, and a huge part of that is learning to work together better as a system, so that there aren't all of these overlapping programs that do, like in Bangladesh, with ADB, IMF, World Bank, all doing quite similar adaptation programs. And one of the strengths of the platform there, I think, is to have brought all of those within the same house under the BCDP. That said, I think in some platforms, perhaps the South African platform, MDBs were not brought on quite early enough, and I think that caused a little bit of friction. It should be possible to bring them in quite early in the design stage of a country platform without giving them the reins and while still making sure that the ambition and leadership of the platform is set by the country. Just to one more model of the country platforms that was mentioned under these vertical climate funds, I think in a way that has already been built into some of the country platforms, especially the JETPs in Indonesia and in South Africa, where the climate investment funds and the Asian Development Bank's energy transition mechanisms are about 25 to 30% of the initial JETP pledges. I'm not totally convinced that GCF would do that same kind of thing. I think GCF has an incredibly important role to play in its readiness programming and making sure that country platforms can stand up and funding the platform development itself rather than the objectives, or separately to the funding that it provides to the objectives. But I think the questions at hand here are such politically important and transformative things that I think it raises some pretty vital questions about over the long-term implementation of these things, if the goals and the delivery and the ambition is set within a regional platform rather than within the country. I think we've talked a lot today about how it really needs to sit in the country, and I think that, it can't be said enough. Thanks very much. I'll pass back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Crispin. Before coming to Malik Saab, I'll just request Dr. Crispin. Listening to the discussion that we actually had around the case of Pakistan, listening to different speakers, if you have any final recommendations, suggestions that you would like to mention from your end before we come to Sohail Malik Saab. Yeah, any final points from your end as well? Yeah.
Well, let me weigh in on this one issue of what to focus on. And, we've mapped out, the different kinds of platforms. Some focus on one particular sector like energy, others are multi-sectoral, others are whole of economy. My only advice would be to not go for such a broad focus that you get locked into a whole range of institutional complexities and are delayed in getting things on the ground. So I think the important thing is to start with one or a very particular focus area, particularly where you can make the most rapid progress and show momentum. And as confidence builds in the mechanism and the success of it, and you learn, through doing, you can then see the platform as potentially initiating other sectoral approaches or even a more complex multi-sectoral engagement. So start small, be focused, build momentum, reflect and learn, and move forward.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Richmond. So if I can just invite Alvin for any final recommendations. Yeah,
Thanks, Ubed. I think I totally agree with Crispin's intervention. I think, I think one thing would be to look at countries that have actually started receiving some money, and what have they done right to do that. And I think that would be a good way of starting off. And I think focused, staying small as we build out is a good way. There are some examples of what SC for All has also tried to do. For example, SC for All has helped in Nigeria to create the Energy Transition Office at the Vice President's office. It was able to mobilize around $4.5 billion in its $10 billion ask in the first year. With different kind of multilateral development donors coming in, and mostly around World Bank, but a few others to kind of come and pitch in. And of course, there are different kind of country packages and different kind of examples that that can be really looked into. Second is, I think this platform, more than anything else, I heard about country buy-in and country ownership. I think it's super important to understand what does that mean. In my opinion, and this is my opinion, any platform, even with just a cabinet agreement, can be overturned in the next 4 or 5 years, right? When a new government comes in, and this is across the board in any countries, right? How can there be some sort of a statutory institutional architecture that once this platform has shown some sort of a result, and who is the driving mechanism and what kind of let's say power this platform has to convene national stakeholders around would be a very, very important question to solve. Without which I don't see much of a sustainability on these kind of platforms, but they would be an excellent vehicle to solve 10-year issues. But if you're trying to look at these kind of vehicles to solve 40-year issues, may not be the best way to kind of think about in terms of that. And finally, this platform would require, especially in terms, because it has a lot to do with planning and implementation, it would require local expertise, local tools, local experts, and that all requires resource intensity. And so that should be the focus of the grant making entities going forward. That's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Alvin. Just if Farhan, if you have just any 1 minute recommendation before we come to Dr. Sajid for the conclusion, and then so he makes.
Yeah, thank you, Abid. I'd like to agree with the earlier speakers. I think, yes, start small, start focused, so you don't get lost in the institutional complexities. I really agree with that point. But as for recommendation, I think really take these existing policies and plans and the upcoming policies as well to build a coherent investment framework and investment pipeline that really lays a credible blueprint for financiers, for international partners, and is grounded in local political and institutional realities. So yeah, just
sure.
that.
Thank you so much, Farhan. Suhail Sahab, I will come to you very shortly, but firstly, let me invite Dr. Sajid Amin Javed. Dr. Sajid is currently working as a Deputy Executive Director at SDPI for his concluding remarks, and then Suhail Sahab, I'll come to you after which Nisma will just pitch what SDPI is doing in just a minute as well. Yeah. So Dr. Sajid, over to you.
Thank you, Ubed. I hope you can hear me the standard start.
Yes, Dr. Sajid, you're audible.
Great, thank you. I think very interesting discussion and very learned, insightful discussion. So I'll not be trying to sort of giving a concluding remarks. So I'll be just giving some sort of my 3 points that I think can help sort of fall in this debate that we are doing. I mean, the first point is that we really understand that climate investments will be skyrocketing as we move forward. I mean, this is two-way dilemma. The one way, the climate change requirement of investments will be really skyrocketing given so much adversaries and so much sharp happenings on the climate change, the intensity. But at the same time, it will also be reducing the capacity to raise investments, and particularly of the global south, the developing countries. And at the same time, the global support, as we are seeing, is sort of depleting in terms of climate financing, in terms of climate support, and we have seen recently. So in this context, I think the local resource mobilization for climate investments will be very critical because the external finances is expected to sort of deplete over the time gradually. At least this is the forecast today, if we see in the future. So I think for these 3 things will be very critical. While first, that is, we're really having a discussion that a very diverse set of financing instruments that really captures multi-stakeholders, multi-perspective, the kind of nature of investments, the larger investments, the smaller investments from the banking sector and others, private sector, small investors. So that is, I think, one that the instruments which can cater the need of diverse set of range of investors and the sources of financing mobilization, that is very critical. And for this, I think sort of an anchorship and the ownership from a very standard platform, that will be critical. I think one key risk will be that the very proliferation of instruments, the financing instruments, that can lead to operationalization challenges. If everybody in silo starts developing its own instrument, sort of the overall regulatory framework and the strategies to operationalize those financing instruments, de-risking those instruments, that will be challenged. So I think the first will be that we need a platform, particularly from the government sector, which has its sort of anchorship and the ownership to develop these financing instruments, pilot those instruments, and bring. And lastly, I think is to bring the stakeholders, those who are leading, are those who can lead these innovative financing mechanisms, are the instruments to bring at one platform so that there is a sort of co-work, a joint work in developing the financing instruments that can then lead to sort of mobilizing those resources for the climate investments, which will be really increasing over the time. So these are a couple of my points in terms of what has already been discussed so brilliantly. But I just thought that while we do need very innovative financing instruments, but at the same time, I think we should have a strategy that they are not very proliferated, they are not in the silos. So there is some common framework, some common platform, and I think government should take a lead because ultimately the investor has to have a trust that these are recognized financial instruments, these are de-risked financial instruments, and they are well integrated within the regulatory frameworks, financial regulatory frameworks, the capital market regulatory frameworks. So we have to integrate this climate investment instruments in the broader landscape of the country's financial and capital market instruments and the policies, all the regulators there. So that I think can build trust of investors in there, and also it can help to have some standard, well de-risked financing instruments that can help raise those investments.
Yeah.
Thank you. Back
Thank
to you.
you so much, Dr. Sajid. That was one of the key pointers that was coming from our discussion as well, and really update you on the key brief that comes out of it. And Sohail Malik Saab, Mustafa just kind of hold you for a bit because we actually wanted to make an announcement and wanted to see if both CRCC, Universe First, and other partners would be interested in joining hands with STPI and the works it has initiated around the country platforms. I'll also be requesting and sending some formal invites to Dr. Crispian as well. I think I'll just quickly invite Nisma to brief on the research and the work that STPI is doing around this, and how we can kind of planning to collaborate with you, as well as taking on board Pakistan's Ministry of Energy and some more Ministry of Finance on this as well. So Nisma, if you can just perhaps in a very 1 minute brief on that, we'll send the later details over the email, and then come to Suhail Malik Saab and Mustafa if they have any other things to add as well. So yes, Nisma, over to you.
Yeah, so as Beth said, we're just working on a little study for country platforms. The idea is to build a case for CPs to like country platforms to finance the energy transition in Pakistan. So just to echo what most of our speakers said today, to start small, and that was the idea behind this as well. So we're just starting with like looking into the energy and financial scenario of Pakistan, just critically identifying gaps, mapping them out, looking at opportunities there, and just exploring, let's say, case studies from like international platforms, just to derive lessons from successful or not so successful examples, just to come up. The idea is to come up with a solution that would work for Pakistan and to actually help it move forward. So I think your interventions have been very helpful, especially in terms of like when we look into which actors should definitely be involved, or which financing instruments or mechanisms that should feed into this. So we'll be using them as part of our study as well. And I think we, as Abed said, we'll get in touch with you, most of you, just to gather more interventions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nisma. Yes, Suhail Saab, and apologies, we have been already 5 minutes over time, but we'll just kind of try to wrap it in the next 3 minutes. So, Suhail Saab, apologies for keeping you on hold, but yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I just missed out, but that can be my final statement also, that I did work on the country platforms mechanisms in my final days with GCF. So, I mean, when I look at the 4 pillars, just quickly, they all closely relate to our core problems of climate finance. I mean, the 4 pillars are: 1, that the translation of country ambitions and commitments into a tangible projects and policies action. That is the first pillar. The second pillar is very important: coordination of key stakeholders. Coordination is missing in most of at all levels, from local to federal level. And third is it should have a catalytic effect in mobilizing finance. And finally, fourth, it is implementing and monitoring of policies and projects. So these 4 pillars are really our key issues. Even though this is a global country platform, and Brazil is a country which has had the first CP funding from readiness financing from GCF. So, I mean, we are all poised because we don't have to build up anything. We have a ready-made case where the 4 pillars are all what we need in our climate action realm. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suhail Saab. So let me come to Mustafa. Mustafa, if there's anything else, if there is any recommendation, final points from you. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't keep people hanging, but I guess happy to support STPI, of course, on this issue. And again, I guess it's been well highlighted at the end as well on the need of something that is started in a very coherent manner, yet it is limited in ambition, so to speak, in terms of the focus areas of the platform. But nonetheless, again, I think this is something that with greater buy-in from the right political segments, from the right institutions, will mothball into something much bigger. And that's exactly the domino effect that I think Pakistan needs in its energy transition journey. So again, happy to facilitate everyone who's playing a part. And again, thank you to all of speakers for some wonderful conversation today.
Thank you so much, Mustafa, and thank you so much to all the speakers for joining us. Dr. Khalid, are you with us for the final word of thanks? Okay, yeah, I think Dr. Khalid also kind of talked just a minute ago. So, but thank you so much to Dr. Khalid, you with us? So, yeah, over to you for the final word. Thanks.
Obed, sorry,
Yes.
your voice was breaking. Could you repeat?
Yeah, I was just saying it's over to you for the final vote of thanks and closing the
Thank you
session.
so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this very, I would say, again, timely, insightful discussion. Pakistan at the crossroads of developing its development strategy that should be focused on climate prosperity, and it should be community oriented, but still focusing on how to develop Pakistan's industrial sector as well as bringing private investors in. So thank you so much for being part of this journey. I hope that from these insights will develop a good report that can be shared with policymakers, and then we can build on it, and we can have a good, efficient, and inclusive sort of climate planning that is based on country platforms. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll keep you posted. Yeah, back to you, Beth.
No, thank you so much, everyone. We'll hopefully keep you updated. Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you.